detonation, where we are busy putting death out of business. And before we cross over to Crazy John Kerecz, my good friend from the United States, I want to first thank Thrivous. You know the deal. $5 all the way up to $160 worth of free Thrivous. You can jump on that deal. The link, the rules are in the description. You can get wonderful nootropics and geoprotectors if you do that and say thanks Thrivous. Also, I am Transhuman, David Kelly. Great job there. Lots of new posts on that page all the time. So thanks, David Kelly, for supporting this episode. All right, Crazy John Kerecz from OHS Radio. How are you?
Doing okay. This is my third week of being working from home over here in the United States. I guess my county that I'm living in was just declared a no leave the house unless you have to county as of this afternoon, which means you're only supposed to leave the house if you're going to something essential or to the food store. It's kind of interesting. I do have 3 jobs right now, and 2 of them are considered essential that I actually get to go out to, and I'm actually happy for that, to tell you the truth. Yeah, the working from home, I tell you, because my day job, I work for the energy office of the state of Pennsylvania, and it's working from home is not as much fun as you think it would be. You're getting calls, you're Skyping meetings, there's a lot of files you want to have, and you don't have the same access to, and it's a lot more stressful than you would think. And I also think the other thing is too, it is not quite as easy to communicate with people. Like when you are actually face to face or side of someone, you go talk to them for actual face to face, or you ask them a quick question. Now you have to either schedule a meeting or make a phone call, or it's just not as pleasant as you might think it would be. It's a little more stressful. I'm getting out for 2 of my other jobs that are considered essential, and that's kind of nice, but even the hours on those have been cut back. So it's interesting. I find earlier today, talking about Thrivous, I was talking to Lincoln Cannon and talked about the fact that presently in the country, with gyms being closed, when you're someone that works a bunch of jobs or has a high pressure job, you like to get to the gym, get your stress out. And right now you can't do that either. You can't get to the gym. And of course, we didn't know when it was coming that you got told. The week before was kind of like, well, maybe sometime next week they make a decision whether you're going to come or go or stay home, and kind of told us on a Sunday. So we weren't necessarily as prepared for it as you like. You only have so much stuff at home. Luckily, I had bought a new punching bag beforehand, so it gives me something to work my tensions out on. But that's an interesting aspect you don't always think about in things like this. It's also interesting in this country. I know you've heard people complaining that everybody's hoarding toilet tissue, which is kind of interesting, but it's a commodity. Last week, me and my girlfriend were out at the store, and they were like, "Oh, only two packs," and we're like, "We only need 1 pack." But now this week we can't find any, so next week we should have got. Last week we should have taken 2. It's just interesting thing how people are hoarding toilet tissue, and it's affecting a lot more people, things than you think of. It's affecting the food and the meat in the grocery stores, because you're realizing too, it affects how normally people go out to eat or order food and stuff, or go to a restaurant and order it and take it home. And that's not happening right now. So that's putting an extra stress on the grocery store than they normally would have, because they're not used to people buying up as much as they normally would, because they'd be getting already prepared food. So that's something you don't think about during these kind of activities. And I guess one of the things I was going to talk to Steele about is how it's affecting our energy and fuel in the country. There's a lot of things that aren't being used as it normally would, and that's messing up supply and demand. I paid $1.99 for gasoline this week to fill up my tank. Last week I paid $1.80 someplace else. I did read this weekend that in the Midwest, now I'm in the Northeast, but there's some places in the Midwest where it's under 30 cents a gallon, the price of gas. And that's phenomenal to me. I started driving back in the 70s and mid 70s. And even when I started driving, I was only paying 55 cents a gallon. So that's just amazing to me, the price. But it's about, cost and demand. You don't have the demand right now. So the cost is going down. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But before I get to, I did have some things to tell you that are also happening with my life. As you know, Steele, I know I'm stealing your show, Steele. Sorry.
No, you're
As
right.
you know,
You keep going. We'll go into all of this in a sec.
As you know, I do some music, and I had done last year a song with Joey Wells, who was the keyboardist for Bill Haley and the Comets. I wrote the song and he performed it. And this year, I wrote a song and me and him sang it together. And actually, it's called Mr. Money by Joey Wells and Crazy John. You can get it on. Hear it on Spotify, get it on iTunes, Alexa. And actually in January, we broke the top 40 with 31st place in the indie country charts. And then, no, it was January we got booked at 40. And in February, I can't talk. It's from being home too much and not talking to people. We hit 19, so we got into the top 20 of the indie charts in February. So I don't know if it's going to go any further than that or any closer, but I actually have to admit it's not the greatest of a song, but people like it. They like Joey Wells. I've always tried to tell people it isn't about music being the best. It's about being something that people like or like the people that are doing it. And so I've been surprised by that. Of course, the fractions of pennies are just rolling in my door. The 1,000ths of pennies are just coming in and blowing in the wind. So I think we mentioned that before, how people think, a lot of people make a lot of money off some of the stuff, and you have to get pretty well to the top to make a lot of money at this stuff. It's amazing. But that's some things that have been happening. My daughter is pregnant with my first grandchild. I was a little late getting with Steele tonight because we had the sex reveal party, the gender reveal, that's what they call it. And it's going to be a little boy. So I'm kind of happy about that. I'll get to spoil him and get him little boy things and get him robot toys and stuff to play with. I tried doing something on my son, got my son into computers young and stuff. And it was back in his day, though, I think the most interesting thing they had was a Legos programmable robot kit you could build. And you'd build these little robots and you program them on computers, and they're made of Legos, and they were really cool, but they were made of Legos, which meant you kind of have them doing things and they'd fall apart because they were just made of Legos. So it wasn't quite as cool as you think it should have been, because anything that was cool, if you wanted it to stay together, you really should glue it, but that kind of wrecked the whole purpose of it being made of Legos to build something else. So a lot of more interesting things and robotic things, and who knows, by the time my grandson's a little older, maybe we'll have some AI pets we can build for him, So some interesting things going on there. So how have you been, Steele? I kind of just ate up a whole bunch of time there.
No, you're all right. I wanted to actually expand on almost every single point there we had. Let's go back to the start and work our way through. So, what was the start? Lincoln Cannon, right?
Yes.
How is Lincoln? I love Lincoln Cannon, and I really enjoyed your previous, which I've seen, your previous discussion with Lincoln Cannon. How is Lincoln, and what did you guys get into on that conversation?
Well, I don't want to get into everything, Steele, because then no one will want to watch my talk with him. So I'll have to keep it quiet. No, the talk I had with him, I'll probably have up tomorrow night. But basically, we just talked about taking care of yourself, getting plenty of sleep, doing something fun. Like he likes to go walking with his family. I mentioned to him where he lives sounds quite beautiful, and I joked with him about maybe Thrivous having retreats, where people go away for the weekend or for the week, and a wholeness kind of thing. Get out in nature, relax, and take care of yourself. And he said he'd never thought about that, but there was what he says about where he lives sounds very beautiful. I think a
Utah,
weekend retreat. Yes, yes. Is a weekend retreat or a week retreat, I think would be lovely. But basically, we talked about making sure you have good nutrition, get good rest, watch out for people right now that are trying to sell you things that really aren't going to help you with getting sick, but it's going to help them financially, but not you. People selling what was it old thing, snake liquid and
Snake
you
oil.
know, snake oil. Yeah, that's it. And I guess he said a couple of his formulas he's perfecting a little bit better. There's going to be some slight changes to a couple of the the supplements. Just some slight tweaks and improvements. I mean, you always want to keep making things better.
Well, it's all open source
And
as well, which really helps.
so he seems to be doing good. He says everybody's doing good there. And I did
That's
like the idea of the retreat because he told us how beautiful the walks were he's taking. But, stress the main thing that, rest is important, nutrition's important. We also talked a little bit about spirituality, that, it's good for you to find your spirituality. I know sometimes me and you and Ben might have slightly different views on religion. I think religion is good. I don't think religion is good when it forces things on you that you are not necessarily comfortable with. But I think it's good for people to have a spiritualness and feel complete.
Well,
I
I've
think
always
that
liked the Mormon
completeness is important.
transhumanists, and the Mormon transhumanists have always been good to me. And the Mormon Transhumanist Association. So I'm really excited about those guys. And religion is this whole big topic. I mean, it's a whole big thing of life and death and everything in between. The big fundamental questions and trying to derive answers from those. And yes, I don't agree with Ben on a lot of things. Probably not a religion as well. But I know fairly well some of his stances on religion. But I'm not entirely sure if you and I would line up because I'm not really sure of what your stance is, Mr. Kerecz.
Yeah, so keep it a secret. Although I
Yeah, well,
have to
that's
admit,
fine as well. That's
no,
part of that's more
I'm just kidding
spiritual
on
than
that. I'm
religious.
just well, yeah, exactly. I'm actually right now romancing. I tell you, I had started my doctorate and never finished it, and right now I am in some communications with an actual seminary that does issue PhDs, and talking to them about maybe doing a PhD actually in theology and AI technology. So I'm talking with them about that because I think that would be an interesting field to think about. I don't know if you saw
This
some of
is
my.
something that's really important to it should be really important to most people is that if God as a sort of entity in whatever way created humans, then why would he create them with the intelligence to build something like AI? And that's the big question, really. We had Dr. Logan Thrasher on, and they're talking about emulating brains in cyberspace, and it's very interesting stuff. But we have the capacity to build ourselves up to this point, which underlies the motives of a creator, and I think that's the real question. What are the motives of the creator? And I think that's what a lot of spiritual texts or religious texts try and answer. I think they try and give a certain sense of meaning to the holistic nature of life. But I mean, a lot of people find it very disappointing because they're seeking religious tone to life, but they find spiritual expedience. It's kind of they find a spiritual solution outside of the structure of religion, and that's very confusing, especially as Westerners, because Western society was built off very a structural evolution of religion. And that goes right back to, especially through the Middle Ages, where it was really polished and refined as an entity of a structural entity. And then, then I guess that's why Martin Luther got cranky, and it's why he knocked that thing on that door,
I
and
like
the
that. I like that word,
Reformation,
cranky. Yes.
and which sparked off the Enlightenment, which sparked off, science and reason and rationale, and deconstructing the world in an empirical way. And then it all goes from there, and it's kind of like it's kind of like watching a brain grow out or a neuron fire and connect with more neurons. It's just very interesting. Sorry, I'm rambling. Yeah, yeah. So
No, that's good. I think that's applied. I tell you, like the guy, I like to think of. I very much loved the last Battlestar Galactica they had, and where the Cylons, which were robots that we made, went off, and they believed that they were the next evolution, and were actually very religious and believed in God. And you think about that, and we think of machines, but no, they viewed themselves as the next evolution and what God had planned. And the show is very interesting because the robots evolved into synthezoids, which is, they resembled humans. And eventually they got to the point where when they actually came to Earth, it wasn't humans and Cylons. It was the humans and Cylons were now having kids together because the robots had become such synthezoids, synthetic human beings, that they were fully functional as human beings.
mm,
And the story plot was basically led to the fact that we were the offspring of not what we think of as pure humans, but humans and synthetic humans. And but the interesting thing about the show was the robots that you would think of as robots or synthetic humans were very religious. They had religion. They had God. And I think that's a good point to realize that thinking of a supreme being or a supreme force or a guiding entity with a purpose that we all function might not just be a function of us, but of all high intelligence.
mm. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I totally
and
agree. And it's kind of interesting in Space Odyssey 2001. The black monolith is kind of like a sort of a cosmic alarm clock or something, where it indicates the evolution of our species, and it happens to be our species on this planet. And it's an accelerant because when the monkeys at the very start of that movie touch the black monolith, they get the accelerant of technology. But when they get to the moon or to Jupiter or whatever that place was way out, the alarm went from the monolith went from a function of accelerating to a more analytical security mechanism, and that's why he ended up in that room, essentially in the human zoo thing, whatever that was. But they
right,
evolved again at the end of that movie. They evolved into a post-human entity that actually was a human entity. It was a post-human, but also it was
right.
the next step of evolution of humans, which was that space baby thing. And it's kind of the same thing. It's a loop inside a loop inside a loop, but it's all on a linear path in an upward trajectory, searching for spiritual excellence, searching for some form of spiritual answers to fundamental questions about life, the universe, and everything. It's very interesting how pop culture tries to remedy some of these answers. And Space Odyssey and Battlestar Galactica attempt to do this through a technology sequence, which is logical. I mean, it's totally logical because that's
Well,
how
I
humans
very
are.
much think that's interesting because I also love when people say to you, this is just a reference back. They say, "Oh, I don't believe God created man or evolution. I believe aliens did it." And I always say, "Yeah, but there's a loop here. How did the aliens come into being?
Chicken and the
Just
egg.
if aliens seeded the earth, that doesn't mean there's still not a God, because just like the robots coming from us and believing in God, if we came from an alien, that still doesn't mean that God didn't create those aliens.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, a loop there.
Yeah, well,
And
the universe is 13.8 or something billion years old. I mean, if aliens had popped up in the last 400 million years, again, there's a lot of time before that so you really have to go back to the start, and that's where that question starts, and I guess that's what a lot of religion focuses on, is that single entity. And sometimes, scarily, they offer very definitive answers to that question, and they say this is the answer, and that can drive people to sometimes good things, very benevolent things. They can do a lot of good with religion, and there has been a lot of good done with religion. But sometimes very nasty things can be done in the name of that certainty as well.
Well, and I've said before, I think it isn't a fact of religion; it's a fact of man. Man is greedy. Man can be corrupt, and anytime you have man involved in things, it becomes corrupt and greedy. But yet, sometimes when you watch what animals do, again, is it a factor of man, or is it in fact a factor of intelligence? And might we not see even artificial intelligence doing the same things that we think of? I mean, because the structures of chimpanzees, now, mind you, we're 99% genetically the same as chimpanzees, but they will form groups. They will get a chimpanzee into power that is not the strongest chimpanzee, but they will use him, and then he owes them favors. And they will bargain favors for power, and they're not, and it's interesting because we think we're the ones that do this, but no, other animals do it too. I guess even dolphins are known, like river dolphins are known to pick up sticks and hit at other dolphins with it, or threaten other dolphins with sticks. And again, they're an intelligent creature, and they're threatening each other with sticks. I mean, so wait until we have self-thinking robots and more advanced AI, and I bet you we're going to find that they also do some of the things we do that we think are unique to us. I think there's a lot of things.
I think that's the real. You've hit on the real answer, is that we're not that unique. We're part of a Gaia ecosystem. There is Gaia, and we are part of the ecosystem. And this COVID-19 has really brought that to the forefront of people's imagination at this point in time. The people have really woken up and said, "Oh, we're not that special, because now we realize that we can be subject to what Trump calls the invisible enemy." You see, before it was, "Oh, we're the best because we have nuclear weapons. We're the best because we have all of these answers to all of these questions, and we have this scientific material, and we have these superstars, and we have this football, and we have these stadiums, and whatever, human civilization." And it all comes to a grinding halt because of, quote unquote, the invisible enemy, which means that humans are subject to nature, just like everything else is subject to nature. But because we've been bumbling along for the last 40, 50 years on antibiotics, on longer lifespans, on larger health span, all great things, big advocate of all that sort of stuff. But we've been bumbling along on this. The hubris has got to a certain point. The human exceptionalism got to a point where they forgot. And the United States Transhumanist-Party, although it advocates mitigating against these future crises, it never says we're above. It just says we know we're part of Gaia, and we need to mitigate against these existential threats. It's literally ingrained into the fabric of the United States Transhumanist-Party. But everybody else was bumbling along saying, no, nothing bad can ever happen to us again. And then, bam, it all shuts down in a week. And, let's move on to that. That's a good segue to toilet paper.
It is a good segue,
hoarding.
although let me get you real quick here a second.
Yeah, go.
I'm sorry. I noticed that was a great segue. I like you trying to steer us back around there. But
no, good.
Something you said was very interesting. Reminded me of War of the Worlds. And maybe we could picture maybe the United States like the Martians, and how they appear to be this unstoppable machine of destruction or whatever you want to call it, and the only thing that gets them is they get sick.
Yeah, the
and they
bacteria.
die just from something right. And here we are, and everything's going along, and something like that happens, and busy people are busy worrying about this and that, and it's something unforeseen you wouldn't never think of. Just like the aliens died, we're having all kinds of trouble. But getting back, talking about this, yes, something else I thought was interesting. You're talking about. We're always talking about UBI, Universal Basic Income. And I thought it was funny how right now I saw a meme or a mime or however you want to pronounce it, that they said, now you have Republicans and Democrats, and they're always all arguing, scrambling and arguing about not wanting to be socialized. But all of a sudden, though, they are concerned with wanting to do what they always were saying before was socialism. Now they're interested in doing it. All of a sudden, they're not calling it socialism, they're calling it something else because now they view it as something good. I think a lot of times they want to call things socialism when they want to put a stigma to them and keep people away. It reminds me also, they argue that UBI is socialism and making sure everybody has medicine. Medicine is socialism. I view it as taking care of your own people, and you should want to take care of your people. But it's funny how now during a time like this, they view it as they reword it and rebrand it, and now it's their idea and it's something good. So
remember, John, that they restructured and rejigged who was a person in the United States under U.S. law. Yeah, you had people, and then you had corporations, which were also people. So when they said, we got to work for the people, that all of a sudden implied corporates as well. And I'm not saying that corporations they're bad. I'm saying that it really muddles the definition of human capital and your citizens, who you're actually, your government, the definition of what your government is supposed to be looking after. Are they supposed to be looking after the people, i.e. the biological beings that call themselves different names because they have feelings and blood rushing through their veins? Or is it an entity that's a collection of these things, which is a profit-seeking entity? Well, you pick, and that's been a big problem with the United States since they've changed that definition. And all of a sudden, you're right, UBI, and this has brought back to the forefront that actually maybe those people over there, corporates, may not be as worth as much as actual human lives in this context. And they thought, well, actually, you know what? Let's try and save some lives here and some livelihoods and not have mass instability. So that's, it's a huge change in Congress. It's a huge change for the federal government to actually start thinking about the citizens again, other than just the people, which we know is probably the corporations. What do you say?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. And the corporations are always a difficult thing. And we talk about pollution. You know how I am with the environment. And the environment and the people versus the people also. But it's interesting sometimes when there's an environmental issue, the flesh and blood people sometimes will side with the corporate people because it's a matter of money.
Yeah.
Sometimes the people working and they don't want to lose their jobs because if the company is made to clean up their mess, it might cost them jobs.
Sure.
And then they're like, oh, well, the pollution's not that bad. Oh, the pollution could be killing you and killing your children, but you're more afraid of losing a job or getting paid less money. So I hate to say it, sometimes the living, breathing people actually give power to the corporate people. Because of their own greed.
This is a trick that, not a trick, but this is something that you watch the language shift whenever a crisis happens. And the language, before was, we make X amount of money, we have this much profit, we have this much expenses, we contribute this much to GDP, to when they want to bail out, to X amount of people have this many livelihoods on the line if you don't bail us out. And it goes to the amount of livelihoods and the amount of employees. But in the good times, you can go through those corporate documents and you can expand and see actually what some of those people are paid to do. And some of those people are paid to, do a very, very little, because what those companies are trying to do is just get as many people on the books during the good times as they can for any reason, so that if anything goes wrong, they can say, look, but we have 1.4 million people working for us, and the ripple effect in the economy is going to be massive. Therefore, we need a bailout. And by the way, I want my corporate bonuses. So during the good times, they're hiring just as many people as possible, so that when, for no reason, so that when things do go bust, they have more leverage over the government in order to get a bailout. And the little people, like you were saying, of course they're going to clamor, because they've got jobs and families and livelihoods and everything that are tied to those and the local communities and the local mayor, and they position those corporates all around in strategic locations to impact as much of the local government as possible, so that they have local mayors and municipal governments on the phone saying, hey, if AIG goes out, my town goes down. You can't let AIG go out. And so that's just a little trick. But yeah, I totally agree. And I totally sympathize with the employees who are caught in that trap, because what are they supposed to say? I'm going to take a hit for the national interest. I'm going to lose my job for the national interest. Nobody's going to say that. That's completely out of the question. Of course, they're going to say, no, I want to put food on my table for my friends and my family and my loved ones and all that. So yeah, it's a nasty, nasty system, and it needs to be amended. It needs to be changed. It needs to be restructured in a way where the abuse you can't cyclically abuse in bear and bull markets, and that's because that's what ends up happening. And the Austrian economists come in and say, let it go flat, let everything go flat. And the national security people come in and they say, well, if you let the airlines go flat, then just China's going to buy up your airline, and you're going to lose all those planes for pennies on the dollar. And so you need to come up. And my solution has always been quite simple. It's you bail them out at the start. You throw the executives in jail, essentially, to disincentivize the people from doing any sorts of those sorts of corruption. It's not, you don't throw them in jail for being successful, but you do. But if they did things like share buybacks or golden parachutes or excessive executive payouts while firing workers en masse, or threatening to fire workers en masse if they don't get their way. If they do this sorts of corporate malfeasance, of course, you do that, and then after the fact, you break them up and you sell them back to American shareholders, American worker unions and corporates, and you break up the big entities and you sell them back into a competitive market where you keep these as smaller entities. You used to have a lot of banks in America. Used to be, every town had another bank. Now it's just Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, and I don't know, whatever, right? There's just 5 or 6 different
banks buying up banks.
In America's like that all over the place. Everywhere I look, there's about 6 big pharma companies, 6 big banks, 6 big airlines, 6 big media conglomerates, 6 big this, 6 big that, and that's all it is. It's just a big circle.
I mean, it is ridiculous. It even happens in the funeral homes. There's big funeral home companies that buy up the other ones.
Is it White Lady or something?
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, exactly. But you're talking about banks. It's interesting. I've heard a lot of talks about people saying, "Oh, well, they want their mortgage payments and payments held for a while when they're not getting paid." And some people are making points like, last time there were problems with the banks got bailouts. Okay, well, they say, can't the banks now help some of the people? They've had bailouts themselves. Can't they be reasonable with the people? Now, they're not really going to do that, though. There's stuff going on here now where they say, well, don't worry, we're going to give you loans. And I'm like, loans are still not going to help businesses that haven't been working for a month, 2 months, or closed. A loan's just more money that they're going to owe to somebody else. They actually need grants and incentives, not loans.
Yeah.
And I mean, loans, I guess, are better than nothing.
That's always the answer. That's literally always the answer they ever give anybody is more debt. Debt. It's here. And it's destroying the...
Dead nation.
Yeah, it's destroying the society. It's ripping the fabric of society, and it's a big threat to longevity because you pull society apart, and you break down the systems that actually create healthy,
Well,
dynamic societies.
here's a horrible thing to say, but isn't that kind of a form of a pimp and prostitution? Get somebody indebted to you, and they have to work for you, and
Well,
I mean,
like the big guys in the Wall Street or whatever, these guys are the mafioso. I mean, these are the king of the mafia here behind me. But yeah, it's the mafioso. It's the mob. It's the mob. The little gangsters who run around on Broadwalk or whatever it is, and do liquor runs.
Boardwalk, yeah.
Yeah, these guys are nothing. The real mafiosos are the guys that we're talking about. The lenders and the bureaucrats, and these are the big mafia drug runners who hide behind state police lines or whatever. These are the big mafia bosses. You're right. It's prostitution on a mass scale.
I used to have a job years ago that I used to have to be up real early in the morning for. Actually, I tell you what it was. I worked for the newspaper company, and I used to write, but I also used to do deliveries. The deliveries made me more money than the writing. So I had to be up early in the morning to do it. And I'd make like $500 cash every week just for a couple hours every morning, 7 days a week. And I said that it was like a heroin addiction. I said the job was killing me, but the money just felt so good for the amount of time I put into it,
Yeah, that's
so
great.
I mean, to be honest with you, sometimes the people themselves, like we were saying before, are guilty of perpetuating the system because they like what they're getting out of it, and they don't want to lose that too. But you have to realize,
especially middle management type players who don't really get the game. So middle management is usually the worst because they don't get the game at all, but they get enough power to control up to 10 or 20 people in their sector, and they don't have enough know-how or knowledge to really know what the guys above them are doing. So therefore, they sit in this very plump section of this fat of the corporate where they're totally insulated from everything on a big wage, and they get to boss people around. And usually those guys are the biggest loudmouths in perpetuating the cycle. But it's done that. They do that in order to sort of obfuscate what's going on up above. And there's plenty of examples, especially in the 90s, and you would know a lot more about this than I would. But when manufacturing shifted to China or to Thailand with Nike and these other places, and the middle management, you go around and you watch documentaries, testimonies, and everything, and it was always middle management who said, "Yeah, of course we dump the chemicals down the river. Of course we dump it every night, where the fish and the thing rot. But hey, I don't make the call. I'm just it's just kind of like I'm just the guard at the camp. At the Holocaust place. I'm just the guard. I don't make the rules. I just point the gun and force the people to their
and
beds.
Cash the checks.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. These guys are they could quit, but they got that heroin addiction. They got that opium. They got that addiction, and they look the other way. And the worst thing is they don't want. And so when they do come out, and there's some very few people who do come out, and they have to hide their faces, and they have to hide, and they have to because everyone's coming after them. But really, it's the heroes like Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks guys who just en masse just told the whole world exactly what's going on with all this corruption. But it shouldn't have to be like that. It really, But the other thing is, with the middle management people is if they don't do it, there's 10 more desperate people below them who are happy to take their job. So really, then they end up fighting for their own position by looking the other way. And that's a bad policy. That's a really bad. I don't know how you get rid of that. That's bad. But anyway,
that is the question. I don't know how you do get rid of that.
No,
but
it's a structural change.
That is the question. I think it has to be a major structural change. Something drastic has to happen to make people stand up and
And I
I mean, the
think,
problem is enough people have to stand up in the middle and to make a change.
and I think it's
But I don't know
happening
if that's ever going
slowly.
to
I
happen.
think, I think we're slowly, the world is
It
slowly
might. I
waking
think
up.
this is. I'm concerned right now with all this stuff now, and I'm concerned with what kind of laws they might change and how they might change the laws. And it always worries me when they're changing the laws and telling you it's for your own good and for your own protection. And I was a little concerned with 9/11 after they were doing some things, and you're like, I'm not really sure that's all for our own good or for controlling us. Something governments and use things to control the people for their own benefit and for their own power. And they will tell us it's for our good. And people will say, oh, our governments wouldn't do that. And this isn't a matter of government trying to change things. But I think even multiple countries would go together to alter things if they think in the long run it would be financially powerful and beneficial for them. You know, I wouldn't see Europe, the United States going together with some ideas to all profit on things. I would not be. I wouldn't be surprised by that. I don't know what you think by that, but I don't think. I don't think countries wouldn't even work together on things to change things and impose new laws and things to control people and for benefit of some form of power or wealth.
You raised some really interesting points, and something that it reminds me of is just something very simple. I mean, in the United States, you should have term limits. I mean, how this is because the leaders that are in charge of you that launched the U.S. Patriot Act or the U.S. Safety Act or all these other acts, they think of themselves in an elitist class, and America was never set up to be an elitist institution. America was a revolutionary idea that separated itself from the monarchs of Europe who were destroying their subjects. Louis the 15th, Louis the 16th, the King and Queen of England, and the the Austria-Hungary Empire. And the Russians and the Americans had enough of this. They didn't want colonialism in a certain way, being colonized by the royals of Europe. And they said, no, we're going to stand up to the tyrants. But in this late stage of whatever the hell America evolved into, it allowed itself through a sort of decadence to allow those who thought, that they were above to think that they were above. And you've had perpetual politicians who essentially have acted like kings and queens and monarchs of old without term limits. And what happens is when they become above, they're above the citizenry, which they never were supposed to do. The U.S. presidents of old, they were the president for a while, and they retired, and they returned to the farm, and they went farming, and they went back to doing whatever they did, or tailoring, or whatever.
Went back to the roots.
Yeah, go back and be a peasant, and this was you were hired. You're a hired brain essentially for a limited time, and then you would go back to doing whatever. America now has an entrenched oligopoly class that says, if I'm not ruling you through the government, then I'm going to rule you through J.P. Morgan. I'm going to rule you through Goldman Sachs. I'm going to rule you through, through Merrill Lynch or whatever. I'm going to rule you here. And then when I've had enough time over here, I'm going to move back to the government class so they can stay perpetually afloat. And that's why the laws get more and more draconian, because it doesn't impact the people in the ruling class. And America revolted, especially this bank behind me, over and over and over again to get rid of this system of people floating around, just like the royals in Europe, floating around, telling everyone what to do, bossing people, changing the laws, being arbitrary, and then and that because it's not the idea of America, and America needs to re-find its soul and its spirit and get rid of these elite classes who just use these entities to hide behind.
Yeah, I think you're right to some extent, but I think we do have a royal class, except the royal class is the corporations. It's not even the term politicians, it's the corporations. And the corporations reach down through their lobby groups, which control the formation of new laws. And the
Do you know what happened to
corporations.
Condoleezza Rice after she finished doing whatever she was doing in government in 2001? Do you know where she went? She ended up.
I don't remember. I do remember. I had known it one time, but I don't remember now.
She
So
went and
fill me
worked at
back in.
Dropbox. She became an executive at Dropbox, and so this is my point. So they start a bunch of wars in Iraq, and then you go and work for Dropbox. You know what I mean? So I agree with you. I agree. It is the corporations, but it's the veil of corporate power, or it's the veil of government power, in the fact that these individuals can jump behind each curtain and each stage, which is dressed up with its own language and its own structural authority and everything else, and they can stay, Condoleezza Rice, she just works for Dropbox. She's nobody. It's a Fugazi. It's a Fugazi. It doesn't matter.
Well, she probably makes good money working for Dropbox. But here's
Yeah,
the other thing to talk about: if the corporations are really the ruling class, the corporations aren't necessarily uni or mono national. They are global.
yeah,
So when I get back to the fact that they could use something like this virus right now to decide to come up with new rules and new laws that are supposedly for the people's best interests, these corporations could be behind some of this stuff, which could affect not just the United States, but multiple countries. And it could be financially beneficial to them all over the world. I mean, I'm not trying to be one of those. I said that earlier too. I said, the thing where they say, "Oh, I don't believe in what's the word I'm looking for? I don't believe in conspiracies," but you have to wonder sometimes. And I did joke I was at that 19 candidate debate there in Chicago, and I joked with some of the people there that I gave up on running for president. And I was one of the candidates for the USDP, but now I'm going to go for being the emperor of the universe. I think I'm going to do that one. Except I don't think there won't be an election. I'll just have to take over. So that's my next plan. No, I'm not kidding. But
yeah.
so
I like your plan. All right, back on the world of the peasantry class, of which we are definitely a part. Toilet paper hoarding is kind of silly. Do you agree?
Yes, I only agree because I don't have any right now.
Yeah, but okay.
I wish I had hoarded
I've been divided on
some,
this.
so I don't.
I've been divided on this,
I
John, because
I do think it's ridiculous, but now I'm sorry I didn't take advantage of getting more when I could have, because now I can't get more because of the people that did hoard. So it's funny because now we're joking because we're kind of being punished for saying no, we don't want to take the limit of 3 or 2 of the big rolls, and just saying, hey, we only need this, because now that we said we only needed that, now we're stuck with not being able to get more.
Yeah, well, in the financial markets, it's gold is the toilet paper of the billionaire class, and that's what they've been hoarding. They've been buying toilet paper. Although they might, if the fiat if the US dollar is going to go to zero at some point, they might be hoarding toilet paper. I don't know. But gold is
You want to buy
gold
some? I'll
is
tell you some.
essentially the same thing. It's at a certain price and it's on the market and nobody wants it. And then everyone's like, "Damn, we should have bought more when we could have," because now you can't get any gold. And if you look around America, you look at the bullion markets here in Australia. You can't get any. It's all sold out. It's the same thing. Gold and silver is completely.
Well, talking about that, we started that earlier. Being in the energy field and how this has affected fuel and energy. And I don't remember if I said at the beginning or before we started. I'm trying to get myself back on there. There we go. But this week, I think I paid $1.99 for gas, and previously I had paid $1.80. And some places in the Midwest, gas has gone down to as low as under 30 cents a gallon in this country. And what people don't realize about this is, especially during this time of the year, this is the time of the year where we're going from winter to summer, cold weather to warm weather. And you do what they call a step down in quality of fuel. You go from the more volatile fuel that you use during the winter because it's colder to a less volatile fuel because of it being warmer. But right now we're having the issues where all this fuel is sitting and the weather is getting warm and nobody's using it. Nobody's going places. Places aren't using it.
When you say
So you kind
sitting,
of
when
have
you say sitting, John, just to clarify, is it sitting in
some of it is
bowsers?
sitting in pipes.
Pipes.
No, sitting in pipes like pipelines.
Yep.
Because it's pushed through pipelines. But the problem is it's sitting there, and the only way you send more through is when it's pulled off. Well, if places aren't pulling it off, it's sitting. And to be honest with you, they had the same. So did I lose you there?
I can still hear you, but we can just see you.
Yeah, there I am. But we've had trouble also in this country with jet fuel because the airlines are cutting back in a lot of their flights, and you will have like a big section of jet fuel sitting in a pipeline, and there's no place that wants it. Basically, is the problem.
Well,
so
there's
therefore,
no
it's backing up. It's backing up other fuels, and it's so funny because normally during emergencies and during crises in this country, and when there's national emergencies, you're worried about places getting fuel and getting fuel to people. People are having a hard time getting fuel. And now we're having a problem where fuel is sitting and not being utilized. Because all of a sudden, it's the same thing like I said about, it's funny how I said about, the grocery store being out of meat because they're not used to as many people shopping for meat. People are normally going to restaurants and stuff. And I'm sorry, in this country, we are horrible about going out to eat and eating fast food. And, a lot of the fast food places are still open, but you have to go through drive-through. And that cuts back on their business. It's not the same as sitting in there. You have people sitting there, running in, grabbing food. Now it has to be drive-through. So you're finding more people are hoarding food from the grocery stores, but they're not driving that far. They only go out to the grocery stores, most people. So it's affecting a lot more things in the country than people realize. And then that starts affecting other people's jobs too, because if people aren't using fuel and fuel is backing up, well, guess what? The people that haul the fuel and do all that stuff, guess what? They don't need as many people working either. And it affects a lot of things in different directions than you imagine right now when you first start thinking about it. It's just interesting. And also when you start shutting down businesses because whether they're considered essential or not, and then there's some odd company that maybe does air conditioning work or something for, say, an electric power plant, or they supply some chemical or something that they use there that might even just be for cleaning or something. Well, guess what? If you can't be keeping the things cleaned or oiled like you're supposed to, you can't be generating electricity like you're supposed to. And it's a very intricate web that this is affecting, because now people aren't, it's not like they're searching for things. Sometimes some of the stuff is there, but it's not being used. And that's making a problem. It's not necessarily the lack of everything as much as maybe the over amount because people aren't using it. It's a very interesting circumstance. And like I said, gas prices being in the Midwest in some places under 30 cents a gallon. That's amazing. When I started driving in the mid 70s, I was buying gas for 50 and 55 cents a gallon when I first started driving. It's hard for me to believe in this day and age that some places it's down to under 30 cents. It's just
and it was all about all the movies were all dystopian about how there was going to be a oil shortage globally, no more oil, all the prices are going to go to the moon, and the whole civilization collapses because of that. And here in reality, looking around, whoa, there's an oil glut. But no, you're right, and it's because we live in a complex system, and when everything's not moving in a complex way, the butterfly effect is just so much louder. It's every
right. The butterfly effect. That's a good way to put it. You know?
It's amplified, and the supply and demand issues. Everyone's getting a lesson. John Kerecz, and you've been here on Detonation helping people understand this, but everyone's getting a lesson in exponential curves. With this virus, everyone's getting a lesson it's not even exponential, but in a curve that that things double and happen quite quickly. Everyone's saying, well, this virus is expanding really quickly. Oh no. But we're talking about exponential curves in technology, John. This is
Right.
so much better than whatever they're fluffing on about. This is huge. But again, they're not going to listen. So when that happens, you will be ready for it. I'll be we'll be in
Well, that's why I have to admit that's why I'm always a big pusher of the space program, and that because I believe people don't realize when you're working towards space, there's going to be, like you said, exponential technology increases, and it's
I'm
going to be in
excited.
directions you don't imagine. There's going to be medical increases because when you're planning to keep people out in space for a long time and deal with the effects of that, there's going to be stuff that helps people with medicine. And like I said, my mom and my grandmother died of dementia, and I think that when they're working on things to make sure your brain gets enough oxygen when you're going out into space for long periods of time, that same technology in medicine is going to help us with longevity and health here on this planet.
Yep.
And it's going to do it exponentially, just like in the 60s, us going to the moon did then. And, people scoff at it, and they don't realize that when we're doing something like that, how that helps us. And it is going to help. And then, like earlier today, I mentioned about the theology and AI, and that's going to be a whole other interesting aspect with how that affects religion and people viewing religion and then viewing life and what is
on
life
OHS,
and what is real.
OHS Radio, I recommend that you bring on Tom Ross. Talk to Tom. I'll organize that with you, with Tom, or come
No,
on.
I do send some emails back and forth to Tom. Me and Tom yesterday chatted a little bit about the idea of the theology and AI technology degree. And
have you read
like Tom
US
very much.
I know I've seen you with
Yes.
his book. Yeah, so you would know. Yeah, it's incredible, right?
Yes, it is. I very much my dealings with Tom have always been great. He's an very interesting person, kind of a Renaissance kind of man, which I like about that. There's a number of people here involved with the USTP. I'd consider them Renaissance men, and yourself included.
You're a Renaissance man. Yeah, no, I don't know what I am. I'm just some guy with a microphone. But yeah. So
No, that's great. You work a good job. You work a hard job, and then you do this. Some of my jobs I might do. I might be working on my PhD and stuff and have a bunch of degrees, but I still like working a job where I get my hands dirty. And I think sometimes that people need to do that. They need to understand what it's like to still work.
Yeah.
Not have theoretical work, but actual work.
Yeah, it brings you down to earth and lets you handle goods and services in reality, not just digital stuff all the time, which is fine too. But it's you need some sort of reality, some sort of real hit. And it's interesting with you mentioned at the start. You said, working from home is different to what maybe somebody imagined it. And, I've always hated the idea of working from home because there needs to be a separation of your home and your work life. This is why we were talking yesterday about homes. Homes are classed, in America, you think of your home as an asset, right? And people get all frightened when their asset crashes in the price of the markets or whatever. But really, it's actually a consumable good. If people actually thought of your house as a consumable good, there wouldn't be as much fear because that's what you do with your house. And it's not supposed to be an asset in the sense, yes, you can quote unquote gamble on your house price or your land price, depending on the structure of the entity, but you can gamble on it on the market if you want. Or you can get capital growth in a high growth suburb or something. Or if you start at a very low base, maybe you can get some capital growth out of it. But really, people should think of their home as a consumable good. And that's what it is. And that's why I have never liked...
just even just the peace of mind. It affects your home as your
Yeah, because you consume it. You consume it for
fortress of
all those reasons.
solitude, you know.
You consume it for all those reasons: for mental health, for sleep, for wellness, for doing whatever you need to do. Your family. You need to consume. You consume it to enjoy it. It's a consumable in that complete way. It's a fortress, and that's what it should be consumed as, not as an entity to sit on to try and get rich quick, slowly, rich, however people think, stupid way they think. But
rich quick scheme.
Yeah, it's rich something. But yeah, if people flick that, if they're people like, because you end up with the propaganda. And I was talking about a gentleman from Australia here about a couple of shows ago. About the Australian economic crisis, and what happens is when people think of it not as a consumable, not in the way that you're talking about, and when you do think about it in this way, you start to realize why people have offices and why they have a house, so you can get stressed, because once the work comes home, you can't escape your work. You can't go to bed and it doesn't feel the same anniore because your work is just outside the door there, and so your stress levels go up because you don't have anywhere to escape. But I was talking to a gentleman.
I'll be honest. Right now, there's an email I should get done for my day. And it's what after 10 o'clock here at night, and it's like I have an email I need to get done for work, and I should probably get it done tonight, not wait till the morning to do it. But if I was at work, I wouldn't necessarily have to do it at home.
Yeah.
Well, I could still do it at home, but I still, I wouldn't feel as pressured to get it done. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, it's not the right environment. But like I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and when you don't think about it in this correct way, which I think is how you're supposed to think about a home, you end up thinking about it in the other way, and that's why you end up reading stories about kids who flip 27 houses, and then they have houses on houses on houses on houses piled up to the moon, all on a debt-fueled lifestyle to try and get that 1 or 2% capital growth or equity out of it, and so they can flip it for $1 million. I mean, that's an insane system, and that's not how you're supposed to think about.
Yeah, see, I've had friends that have done house flipping, and they usually do it for so many years, and they do good at it, but it wears them out, and they only do it so long.
Yeah, there's a difference between house flipping and renovation type work. I actually respect the reno type people who they go in, they get a house, they know what they're doing, they tear the walls out, they do it the bathroom, all that sort of stuff. That is actually a respectable work and trade. It's I actually have a lot. Again, but people who actually just try and buy houses for the sake of getting houses so that they can get more debt to get more houses. This sort of because it's cheered on by the media, it's cheered on by the establishment, it's cheered on by the banks. Everybody encourages these people to do this, and I'm watching them now. It's in the news here in Australia because this was a huge horror, because we're the biggest debt nation in the world when it comes to people doing this. Yeah, and house mortgages and stuff. The nation's going crazy. But
it's like over here years ago, they tried to get people to pay off all their loans and stuff with the equity in their house, and pay off your credit cards with the equity in your house. And it's like, why pay off credit cards that do not have a lien on your property with your property? It's like, you don't quite get that. If you didn't pay those credit cards, they couldn't take your home. But the minute you take out more money out of your house to pay off the credit cards and get yourself further in debt with your house, then if you falter on your house, you lose your house.
Yeah.
You wouldn't lose your house on those credit cards.
And like the system, and you've heard me on the show, I mean, the system is cracked anyway. The economic system is cracked, and this coronavirus just really accelerated the cracked economic system. And a lot of the predictions I was saying about the S&P falling, the Dow falling, and everything like that, that was kind of baked into the cake already. But this coronavirus has accelerated all that to the fore, and it's really like brought out all the financial strains in the market. And the people who lived on a debt-fueled lifestyle are now the ones who didn't, you can't borrow out of the future. I think that's the big problem. You shouldn't.
The old joke where you can't rob Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna hurt. I think it's gonna really, really hurt. Our government is scrambling to try and save these people, but really, there needs to be a psychological shift, because it's if we can get a psychological shift in how we structure our entire economy, it's gonna be better for longevity. And this is a problem I have with a lot of this stuff, is because it actually damages longevity, because we end up going down the same rabbit hole where we're trying to fix, I don't know, whatever, stupid stuff. And we're no longer talking about gene therapies or AI or space, because we don't have the money to talk about any of this stuff. Or we're not talking about radical advancements in computers.
We're just trying to scratch by is what happens.
And that's so boring, because we're in the 21st century with all this abundant technology, and we have the ability to race into the future now, and we're still talking about stupid stuff, like that we shouldn't even be talking about, like unemployment, when we could have a UBI.
Well, exactly, and it is sad. We should be further enough alone, but like you said, we're. I don't know what the answer is, and some of it's I think I've said before. Some of it comes down to human nature, and we don't always realize. I used to years ago use the term ascension. People should hope to ascend, and I don't mean that is in just spiritually, but technology-wise and stuff. We should be always striving to become more than we are, and to do more for each other. And sometimes I think people are just, complacent or preoccupied with things that don't really help them to go any place better.
And this is why I like you, because you're not gonna be afraid, and you aren't afraid. It's essentially to enhance your own body, with prosthetics or with chemicals, with like Thrivous or like supplements or whatever. Whatever you have to do exercise, go to the gym. You mentioned going to the gym before. These are really important things for expanding and creating a better, healthy lifestyle for us ourselves and individuals. And I'm glad you're my friend, so you can keep abreast of some of these issues and tell me what I have to do in my own life to prepare.
Just keep working at stuff, I mean, and if things don't work, you just got to keep trying new things.
Yeah.
That's just what it's about. I think it's great you do this show right now. You're not doing your other work, and I'm glad you're still chugging away at this, and you just got to keep working at it. Who knows what can come from it? But I mean, who knows what connections you're going to make today, and who any of us are going to be tomorrow. And I mean, you don't know. That's like I always say, somebody should always be nice to somebody that you run into, you work with, because you don't know who they are, who they've been, and who they're going to be. You just don't know. But as far as anything, you just got to keep plugging away at things. And, what's it, all things, there's no stupid questions, only stupid answers. But it's like there's nothing stupid to try. You got to try things in your life, and you got to live your life and enjoy your life and be passionate about different things and get out there and do things. And sometimes I'm afraid with society that people are afraid to do things, and they get put into boxes. And, a lot of those boxes they get put into are actually very soft cardboard, and they could break through them easily if they wanted to be, or they wanted to, and they just don't try. But I think we've probably been talking long enough tonight. I'll let you get going there. But I'm very interested. We got to make sure we get through this and talk again soon about, hopefully what comes out of this. I'm interested to see with this virus, like I said, also what kind of new laws and rules they try to impose on us based on this. I have that concern that they might try and do that, and we'll have to see what they do, but hopefully it could be a beautiful thing. People could listen to us about the UBI and about taking care of each other. We may be coming out of this, we will have a universal basic income. Maybe we're going to have some better health care. Maybe there are going to be some great things that come from this.
Yeah, there's always opportunity in every crisis, and maybe I could change the name of my show to Isolation Nation. How about that?
There you go. But I mean, it's good to have groups like the USTP that are striving for these things and pushing these things. And there's other people out there pushing. Yang is still pushing his stuff, and that it's great. I think there has to be everybody out there that dreams of a different world and a different society, and of taking care of each other and us being there forever.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I thank you very much for your time. And you look after yourself, and I don't know, like, I don't know what you're gonna do about the meat in the supermarkets or the toilet paper issue or something, but I don't know. Yeah, it's all a bit crazy at the moment with the whole food in the shops thing. It's calmed down here a little bit. I think last few weeks, the last 3 weeks were were a bit hectic, but I think people have overbought and overspent, and now they're running out of money themselves, and so the goods are returning to the shelf. I noticed Walmart actually, and a bunch of others, Whole Foods, they have posted their profits, and in the first 3 months of the year, they posted as many profits as they made in the whole of 2019. So that shows you the extent of the hoarding and the panic buying. Is that the end of it? As people spent their whole yearly budget on food and stuff in the first 3 months, and now they're not going to make any more money for the rest of the year? I don't know. Is this going to continue on and on and on? I don't know.
It's interesting. They are hiring more people at the food stores because of the business they're getting.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. I don't know, but we will have to check back soon and let each other know what's happening down under and what's happening here in the UK, the US.
The UK.
Not the UK, yeah. I'm forgetting what's coming. Yeah, the UK, the US, and down under, and see how everything's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Kerecz. It's always good to talk to you, and get Tom on OHS or something. I think that
I will. I'm gonna. There's a couple things I want to talk to him about, and I thank you, Steele, for just being you and keep doing the show and pushing through. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate. Look forward to dealing with you much more in the years to come.
All right. Well, thank you for all your support, and thank you to everyone who watched That Nation, and we'll see you in the future. And thanks to all the Patreons. And the Future of Humanity Project says the future is in your hands. That's Det Nation. I'm Steele Archer. That's John Kerecz from the UK.
I was like, looking at my hands. The future's in my hands. Oh well, we're doomed. No, I'm like,
nah.